How's it going, everybody? Rival Indigo here. Today's video is going to be a Star Trek news slash conjecture video, but I also do want to say my voice may not be perfect right now. I've had a long weekend both at work, which I use my voice a lot at work, so that's probably worn from that, and I spent 8 hours in a very hot vehicle with no AC on Saturday doing the Pokemon Go season finale, so I'm probably kind of fatigued there as well. Either way, I saw something interesting I wanted to talk about. I am a big Star Trek fan, like outside Pokemon and like Xbox and things like that. It's probably my other biggest fandom interest, other than I suppose maybe like Tom Cruise, like Mission Impossible type stuff. Anyways, there's an article here from Screen Rant. The author is Craig Elvey, and in no way is this meant to be critical of them as a person or even professionally. I don't know this person, no idea what their deal is, anything about them. I just read their article, right? And I disagree with some things in it. Obviously, though, by reading it, I can tell this person is a Star Trek fan. They have some sort of passion or at least a glancing interest in Star Trek as an entertainment writer, it seems. The article, though, is titled, "Thought Star Trek 4 was difficult? Just wait until Star Trek 5. Now, first off, I want to say I do think it is somewhat silly we're talking about a fifth entry in the series when we've only just had it confirmed that a fourth entry in the series is officially happening, and then we haven't heard anything really since. So let's wait for the fourth one to get into pre-production a little bit further before we start talking about the fifth. However, I'm going to read a little bit of what it says, and then I'll probably paraphrase some and just kind of summarize it, but I agree with a lot of things they say here in the beginning. Quote, Star Trek 4's development has been rougher than taking a photon torpedo with shields at 10%. I think this is the part where I know they're a Star Trek fan because they're using these corny references. I get it. But when the time for Star Trek 5 comes, Paramount's current big screen troubles could look like a stroll through the holodeck in comparison. There we go again. Under the watchful eye of J.J. Abrams, the Star Trek franchise underwent a complete makeover in 2009, with a fresh-faced cast and a modern, sleek style dragging the franchise back to mainstream prominence. Sequels followed in 2013, Star Trek Into Darkness, and 2016 with Star Trek Beyond. But with box office dwindling, Chris Pine's enterprise came to a sudden standstill. So they go on to talk about how many failed ideas and aborted projects there have been for Star Trek 4, including ones that would bring Chris Hemsworth back, who was, of course, before he was Thor, he was George Kirk in the first film, Kirk's father. And then there was somebody, S.J. Clarkson was going to do the film, and then Noah Hawley was going to do a film, and somebody named Matt Shackman. Quentin Tarantino even had like a rated R idea, but I thankfully I love Quentin Tarantino and I like doing creative new things. That's why I embraced the Abrams films. It was something new for the franchise, but R-rated for Star Trek, I don't know how great that would work out at this point. Either way, it's had its ups and downs. Like, this has been a development hell in the sense of, well, there just hasn't been any development for quite some time. But the thing I agree with here that I think is really cool, the writer brings out the fact that Star Trek 4 has survived so much, quote, that Star Trek 4 has survived so much can be attributed to one factor and one factor only, the Kelvin timeline cast. Over the past 6 years, the likes of Carl Urban, Zachary Quinto, and Chris Pine have all spoken positively about making a fourth Star Trek movie, and those sentiments were returned double by audiences. Reportedly, Paramount only decided to push forward with Star Trek 4 because market research indicated the Kelvin cast was still adored by fans. If a fourth Kelvin timeline Star Trek movie happens, it'll be thanks to the cast's enthusiasm and the audience's enthusiasm to see them. I actually very much agree with this because I love the cast of this series, and everybody I know, for the most part, other than like some of the few annoying fans that don't like the series for whatever reason, and even them, many of them will agree it was a good casting job. Like, if you're going to recast these iconic characters, they picked some pretty decent people for it. Chris Pine done a pretty darn good job as Kirk. I think Zachary Quinto as Spock was absolutely fantastic. Carl Urban as Bones was absolutely fantastic. Simon Pegg as Scotty, I was kind of on the fence about him originally, but I think by the second film, I was like, okay, yeah, I see that. Because I don't know, even in the original Star Trek, like the original series from the 60s, Scotty was never like a fat guy or nothing, but he wasn't like this scrawny little dude that, you know, that's Simon Pegg is. So there was something about it, and the way he spoke was just a little different, but it grew on me, and I was like, you know what, I like him. Zoe Saldana as Uhura was a pretty good casting choice. Like, all these people were actually done really well, in my opinion. So, in fact, just as a little side reference, I guess, or back in definitely before 2009, when Heroes first came out, a lot of Star Trek fans, including myself and my good friends, when we saw Zachary Quinto as Siler in that show, there was something about not only his facial features and like the sharpness of his like eyebrows, obviously, but his performance. Like, it was cold and calculating and kind of emotionless, and there was something about that, along with his appearance, that we just kind of, on a lot of message boards and forums and stuff, we were like, this guy could be a young Spock. Like, if they ever recast Spock, this is the dude. And then it was him. It ended up being him. Anyways, I definitely agree with that. The cast of the Kelvin verse of the Abrams series, they are fantastic, and I think that the fact that they have actually expressed, because many of them have moved on to other projects and made money. Chris Pine's been out there doing pretty decent movies. He's making money. Carl Urban's been working on other projects. He's on The Boys on Amazon, which has been highly successful. Simon Pegg, always, of course, is in like Mission Impossible and various other things. And then Zachary Quinto, he's done American Horror Story, and I believe multiple other projects. These people, I mean, other than Zoe Saldana, I haven't really seen her in a whole lot lately, but I'm sure she's got things going on. They've all got jobs. They're all making money, you know? They weren't, I mean, sure, they probably made good amounts of money off the Star Trek films, but these were not billion-dollar box office movies, right? And yet they all still turn around being not desperate for money. They all still turn around and go, hey, you know, I actually really liked doing those Star Trek movies. I wouldn't mind doing another one. You know, I'm just waiting for them to call me up, basically. That's what it's been with all of them. So that is good. That's really great as a Star Trek fan, because there have been so many times when you hear the lack of appreciation for the job that people had doing Star Trek, or the lack of appreciation for the fandom around Star Trek, because we will support you. If you have our backs as Star Trek fans, we'll turn around, we'll support you. You'll basically have a job for the rest of your life in the convention circuit at the very least. So, anyways, just having that enthusiasm come from the cast, and it's, to me, it means something. I think that's cool, and it makes me more interested in seeing them again play those characters. Now, this is where I start to disagree with the writer, because he goes from talking about that enthusiasm for the Star Trek series and doing a fourth film from the cast, and then he says that's not a luxury Star Trek 5 will have. It says, although Star Trek 4 isn't explicitly confirmed as the final entry in J.J. Abrams' Kelvin series, the constant string of delays and cancellations means it's highly likely this will be their final frontier. Yeah, but why? Like, so if you've gone through this many delays, cancellations, etc., now we've officially announced it's going to happen. Once they get that ball rolling, and a fourth film actually enters production, starts filming, do you know how much excitement there will be once we start to see photos of sets, promotional stuff coming out, you know, whatever it is. And then one day when we finally get an actual teaser trailer or whatever, you know, however far down the road that is, the excitement's going to be there. And if it's tracking well, just like it says that Paramount has done their market research and found the popularity of the cast, etc. So obviously it's surviving all these delays and cancellations, and if they manage to make a good fourth film and they promote it correctly and they make it a big deal again, like say the first couple movies, it'll be a hit. And if it's a hit, what do? They basically immediately greenlight the next project. Like for instance, just as a recent Paramount project, when the first Sonic movie was about to premiere, they had already greenlit the second one. Now what does that mean? That means instead of having all these delays, cancellations, etc., because Star Trek Beyond was not tracking as well and the box office returns were not as good, so they didn't immediately go, okay, cool, we're going to put money into the next film. That's why it's been like this. So if you're looking at, for instance, Sonic the Hedgehog, that one was tracking so well, they could see before it even came out, this is going to be a success. They didn't know how big, but they knew it was going to be a success. So they already started the second film. Yep, greenlit, pre-production. Let's start writing it, finding, re-signing the cast, etc. So if the fourth film is about to come out, or it comes out and it has a good box office launch, it doesn't even have to be like mind-blowing stuff. We're not talking about Top Gun here. We're not talking about Maverick. It just has to be good. If it's gonna launch in like a 60-70 million range, if they do it right, like the first couple movies, and there's no reason it couldn't. I think even Star Trek Beyond launched in the 50s, and that's not bad if you can sustain good success afterwards. So if that's the case, they will greenlight a fifth film, as long as the cast is not like opposed to it, And if they're this enthusiastic 6 years after the last movie about doing a fourth, then I don't imagine a world where they're actually opposed to doing another film. If they come back, have a good experience, the movie does well, fans like it, Paramount will like immediately be like, all right, so are we signing you guys for a fifth film? So that's really not a major issue. I don't see why they make this a bigger deal than it is. It says, after the nightmare of Star Trek 4, doing it all over again seems crazy, which means Star Trek 5 would need to start over. But why? Again, I don't understand this line of thinking. Yeah, it's been a nightmare, but it hasn't actually been a nightmare for the cast and crew because there has been no cast and crew. Nobody's actually suffered a nightmare, right? Other than like some writer that was brought in or some director that was attached to it. Nobody actually assembled cast. Nobody actually assembled crew and started putting sets together or whatever. Like, nothing's happened. Nobody's suffered a nightmare. So there won't be like some bad taste in anybody's mouth. It's just we've waited longer than maybe we had to, So if they get a fourth film, why do you assume that there needs to be delays and cancellations? Because like I said, if a fourth film comes along and the fourth film is projecting to be successful and make money, then Paramount's going to turn around. They're going to go, hey, all right, guys, we want to sign you on for a fifth film. Are you opposed to that? What are your terms, basically? Now, there's only two things that really seem to get in the way. The cast is just not interested because maybe the actual production of Star Trek 4 is an issue, but as long as that goes over smooth, that shouldn't be a problem because all three of the other films had pretty smooth production and they enjoyed their time. J.J. Abrams, I think, does a pretty good job with his production of films. Anyways, the second one is money. So if Star Trek 4 is done and they're paid however much, I don't think that may be the other side of this too. Paramount might actually, in the end, be playing a genius card here, because by waiting this long to green light a fourth film and actually get the production going, the value of the cast is lower than it was 6 years ago. Because again, like I said, these people have all been doing jobs and making money, but they haven't been like superstars. At that time they were pretty big stars because of the Star Trek series. So they may actually be able to get them in at an affordable rate for Star Trek 4. So the only thing I can see is if Star Trek 4 like blows up, in which case I don't think they'll have a problem re-signing them for a bit higher of a paycheck, or it does pretty good, right? But if for some reason the cast and crew want more than they're worth when it comes to how well the film does, that's it. Those are the really only main issues. Nobody would ever sit here and expect that you'd have this kind of development hell again. This film never really entered development hell. It had some people pitch some ideas. That's it. So that's not a problem. They also, so feeding off that, they go into the big problem would be figuring out what Star Trek V should actually be. More specifically, which era and cast replace the Kelvin timeline. Well, you don't. Like, again, this is all simple. Like, you don't. And like I said, I'm not trying to bash this person. Like, they obviously know Star Trek. They know about its history. They like, when I read this article, it doesn't come off of it like they copy and paste this crap from Wikipedia. They seem to actually know Star Trek. And they even acknowledge the lesser popularity of Star Trek Discovery, of STD, and the fact that Strange New Worlds does actually have more of a mainstream presence and that people actually kind of universally like it. So they know their Star Trek. I'm not bashing this person at all. In fact, I wouldn't mind comment from them on my points about this, because I think that maybe they're just overthinking things. I really think that's what's going on here. They're overthinking simply by writing about a fifth film before a fourth film even gets started production. I mean, we're technically in pre-production at this point, but they overthink the nightmare of Star Trek 4. Yeah, but again, nothing's happened, so there's no nightmare. The cast and crew haven't been involved in any kind of nightmare. So if they have a good time producing a fourth film, and the film is successful, there's no reason for them not to want. They're actors, they want jobs, and they like when people like them. Obviously, and they've talked positively about the franchise and about their experience and wanting to do a fourth film. So I think that would literally just repeat with a fifth film if we got there, if it was financially successful. Now, if Star Trek 4 came out and bombed, we shouldn't even be talking about Star Trek 5 at that point. We should go, okay, now what do we do? Because we thought we had something and we obviously don't. That would be different. So, but then they go on with this idea that, oh, well, a fourth film happens and everybody's going to be like, no, screw that, I'm done with Star Trek, apparently. And so we'd have to move on and replace the Kelvin timeline, which you really don't have to. So there's two options here. One, you don't have to replace the crew or the Kelvin timeline, the cast, because they'll just do a fifth film. Simple as that. Then the second option is you just keep doing films in the Kelvin timeline without them, right? Like, we didn't jump timelines when we moved from the original series cast to the Next Generation series cast. We jumped forward in time. But at this point, my viewpoint of the Star Trek Prime timeline, Prime universe, is that it's pretty well run its course, especially on the movie side. But so let's talk the series side. By the time we ended Voyager, and now what we're seeing from the future of Star Trek Picard, oh my god. Anyways, the Star Trek Picard, which basically is the most direct sequel series to the end of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and we already see what that looks like. And I'm sorry, that it's starting to get just silly. The technology, the aesthetics that they've employed in it doesn't even feel like Star Trek, but that's a whole other ballgame. But let's just, it's becoming out of touch. Voyager was already kind of getting there. At least Voyager, aesthetically and story-wise and all that, structure-wise, the styling of the show, the format, it still was Star Trek. But we were starting to get into these things like the bioneural gel packs that replace the isolinear chips. If you don't know Star Trek technology, you have no idea what I just said. But let's just say it was replacing technology that, while it was highly advanced, a few hundred years from now, obviously, it was still grounded in some way that we could recognize it as technology. The problem is you started to get some of these things that became more and more and more magical. And I don't mean that like, oh my god, it's so magical and fancy, but in the sense of like, it became just technobabble, just became jargon that meant nothing. Whereas almost everything, in previous shows, you could find a way to actually explain it in some sort of real world application. Voyager was already getting there. Star Trek Nemesis happens after the end of Voyager, and I think actually, as much as the show is maligned by many fans, that could have been a great aesthetic to continue forward with. The way that Nemesis looked technology-wise, and for the look, the way that like the Enterprise looked inside and out, the way the technology was employed. Hell, they even brought a dune buggy vehicle on the show. Is pretty darn cool, in my opinion. You had a phaser cannon on the back of that thing. But either way, it looked like Star Trek, pretty advanced, but also in a way that just it didn't go too off the deep end. And when you get to Picard, you've got some stuff that's just outright dumb and silly, but then some of it's kind of going off the deep end. And then you see the far future of Star Trek in Star Trek Discovery, where they've jumped way ahead in the future, and it's warp nacelles that aren't even attached to starships and all kinds of just ridiculous crap going on there. So I feel like in the Prime universe, we've kind of worn things out. Every meaningful era of Star Trek has already been explored and defined, and there's certainly ones that should be left alone, and the future doesn't look very fun and inviting for your average person. It starts to just look more and more and more like technical magic. It doesn't look like Star Trek. And Strange New Worlds is doing a fantastic job of doing a pre-TOS, like between Enterprise and TOS. It's a fantastic show so far, but I really think that needs to wrap it up for the Prime universe, because it's not going in good places. And if you're on screen, there's no way, in my opinion, you bring any of these series to the big screen. Obviously not Discovery, because even the writer here says, well, I lost it here, but even the writer here admits that Discovery just isn't popular enough and nobody really cares about it in the mainstream. And so obviously you wouldn't bring that to be a film. And God, that would be so disastrous. But my viewpoint is you just keep doing Kelvin. If for some reason the cast doesn't want to do, or you can't get them to do, or whatever, a Star Trek 5, then you go, okay, cool. Well, that was great. We did 4 good movies, solid movies with this cast, the Starship Enterprise, but move it forward to a new era. The Kelvin timeline has been established, in my opinion, to be the current premier big screen look and feel of Star Trek, because it's both flashy and big. The ships and effects are big and flashy, and there's shiny stuff, and there's humor and big time action, space battles and all that. It's great, right? Spectacle. But then the underlying stories and character-driven aspects are very, very much Star Trek, and the universe is executed, for the most part, in a Star Trek way. And it is the most visible version of Star Trek of the last decade plus, since 2009. So the public recognizes it, Star Trek fans recognize it, and I think that when you have an alternate timeline like the Kelvin timeline, you have an opportunity to continue forward into fresh new territory that hasn't already been claimed. Like Strange New Worlds can only go so far before you start bumping up against the next piece of history that already exists in the original series. And there's only a few gaps left in the Prime universe to fill in, and I kind of don't want some of them filled in. We know some stuff about them, and I feel like the more you try to retread the history and tread through these little gaps in the history, the more chances you have of messing up what already exists. The Abrams films have the unique capability to completely go through the entire, I suppose, eras of Star Trek again, but also not ruin the existing Star Trek, or not bump up against pieces of canon it has to abide by. There's definitely some freedom that an alternate timeline gives for creativity, and that's what I would want to see. So those are the 2 best options. This writer starts going into crossover stuff of doing legacy characters from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, lowered. Like, multiverse is not actually working out as well as people think for Marvel. It becomes confusing and convoluted and silly, and Star Trek has enough confusing, convoluted, and silly crap that goes on. I mean, the show's existed for 55 plus years with like what, 7 TV series, 6 TV series? Well, not counting STD and Picard, and like 13 movies at this point. Yeah, something like that. So the last thing Star Trek needs to do is attempting this multiverse concept, franchise spanning ensemble in a time spanning battle for all reality. Like literally you're just trying to do Endgame in Star Trek, and that's ridiculous. So if you want to continue on in the big screen for Star Trek, and for some reason you're going into Star Trek 5 without the cast of Star Trek 4, which at that point you don't call it Star Trek 5. Obviously, it is the 5th film in the series. But at that point, you don't recast them. You don't start over again. You know, whatever. There's so many concepts. Somebody had a really great concept about a show that's Carl Urban as the captain of a medical ship. Or, excuse me, like kind of like a medical sciences type ship, right? They're exploring, and they're responding to distress calls and things like that, but they're exploring and finding new medicines and science among the stars. I'm like, that's really cool, you know? Like, they're not like far-flung deep space type thing, but they're kind of out there near the frontier, worlds that have already been like tagged for research type thing. So let's go chart the biology of this world and see what's useful to Federation medicine, and can we cure this with something from this world? That would be great. That would be so cool to have Carl Urban's version of Dr. McCoy. You know, maybe the Enterprise crew breaks up and goes their own ways or whatever, and he's ended up captain of his own little medical research vessel. You know, there's so many possibilities. Or you jump forward to the quote future of the alternate timeline and do the Excelsior of the Kelvin time. I would love to see I love the design of the Enterprise and what I see of the Enterprise A. Like, I would absolutely love to see a Kelvin verse Excelsior. That would be absolutely fantastic. But you have plenty of options. You literally just move on to a new Enterprise with what was the Enterprise B? Captain Harriman, you know, or something. But obviously things would be different in the alternate universe, but there's plenty of options. You now have an open road ahead with the creation of the Kelvin timeline. It should not be abandoned, because if the TV side of things ever falter, you still have a complete universe to explore when it comes to the Kelvin world, and it's so good aesthetically and in format for the big screen. They really need to hang on to it. So anyways, that's just my critique of this article. I'm going to post a link down below. Like I said, this is not meant to knock this person personally or professionally. Quite obviously, they are a fan of Star Trek based on the way they write this, and honestly, based on this concept of this massive crossover thing. I'm going to use a term here. It sounds like a huge fan wink, the type of thing that people, you know, would write on fan boards and stuff in like 2006 or 7. And like I said, it's more of me critiquing this as a fellow fan who's kind of grown out of some of these concepts, looking and going, that's just silly, dude. But beyond that, these other things, the assumptions about Star Trek 4's production being a nightmare when there's been no production to be a nightmare for anyone involved, why wouldn't those people want to be there for a 5th if that film is financially successful and people like it, you know? And if for whatever reason, whatever scenario it's not, cool, just move forward in the Kelvin timeline, you know? Like, if for some reason Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, they're like, you know, that was cool, we enjoyed it, but we kind of want to move on from Star Trek after doing a 4th film, just keep doing more Kelvin stuff. See if any of the cast wants to stick around and to bounce something new off of them, or go to the next Enterprise. You know, who inherits the Enterprise A after Kirk retires or moves on? Or maybe in this universe, Kirk actually likes the idea of becoming an admiral or whatever, you know? So I've rambled long enough. This video is about to hit 30 minutes, but those are just my thoughts and ideas. Let me know down below what you think in the comments, and remember to like, subscribe, and comment.